started somewhat late, so that's why we will need to shorten it a little bit. 10 minutes, is that good? Or yeah. So Rita and Younus, can you please join me here on the table? And I will ask you each to talk for, let's say, 2 or 3 minutes on one specific aspect, and then we will open it up to the floor.
Are these on? Good.
Yes, they are. And I still think I probably don't need the mic. If I do need the mic, start waving at me, and I know, okay. So I think the question that I have for Younus is just following up a little bit on what Rita just said about the situation for Catholics. There are Catholics who like Mary, there are Catholics who like interreligious dialogue, but often Mary is kind of within Christianity a source of tension. I think you can say in the Islamic world that probably you have similar tensions. Can you speak to that a little bit? And then after that, I want to ask Rita an aspect that you discussed, Younus, namely the possible way to look at Mary as a prophet. And then I will ask Rita if you know of any approaches in contemporary Catholicism or Christianity that talk a bit more about the prophetic moment. But first, Younus, about.
So thanks so much, Tim, for that question. And I think it's a wonderful question because Mary has been debated even within the Islamic tradition, as many of you and many scholars in the audience could speak to. And maybe I can refer this to the Pope's recent visit, because what I found really remarkable is that the Pope chose to visit Morocco, and the Pope, has not been in places such as Saudi Arabia or the Arabian Gulf, because you find different strains of Islam. So you might find a more Sufi, more Ash'ari, kind of Sunni version of Islam that's more open to intercession, shifa'ah, or visitation, ziyarah, particular graves and so forth, veneration. And those countries would represent Morocco. Morocco is a good example where maybe some of those practices would be more acceptable. Of course, you might find Muslims who would disagree with that and look down on the visitation of graves and so forth within Morocco. But definitely within the Arabian Gulf, you would find that to be permissible or even against the law. So I lived in the Arabian Gulf, I lived in Qatar for 2 years, and that type of Islam is not officially sanctioned by the state. So one of the questions to ask is, what type of dialogue are we speaking about between Muslims and Christians? What type of Muslims are more amenable to seeing Mary as a figure and seeing her as a potential tool? The quote that was mentioned, right? So the idea of Mary, even some Muslims call out for her devotion, right? For many more Salafi kind of maybe Protestant, maybe Muslims, they would object to that. They say, how can you call on to Mary? Or maybe other versions of the faith would maybe not see that.
So you wanted to talk about Mary as a prophet? Or
the prophetical function of Mary, for instance.
yeah, I think that this is a topic that's really gaining emphasis today. I mean, the idea of Mary as a prophet, the idea of Mary as strong, the idea of, but although there are medieval images, I don't know if you've seen these images of Mary as also a scholar and interpreter of scripture. There's one image I'm thinking of where Joseph actually has the baby and Mary's reading. So there is a role for that. But yeah, I mean, I really haven't actually looked that much about the idea of Mary as a prophet today. But I think that I mean, not using the word prophet, I don't think we use the word prophet for Mary. Christians do. I think she's underutilized in that regard.
So let me rephrase that, and then we'll go to the public. Can you think about Mary as, let's say, a model for women? And in well, not only for women, also for men, that does not, let's say, underscore the idea of her humility, of her obedience, these traditional female roles, but somewhat different roles.
Yes, and actually, I'm thinking of some more art. I don't know if you've seen this images of Mary from this Mexican artist called Yolanda Lopez. And I wish I could pull it up right now. It's a beautiful picture of Mary, and I like to call it Mary the Runner, because literally she's wearing running shoes. So it's actually the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, but she's not, you know, the typical Guadalupe is she's very submissive, obedient, looking down. And Yolanda Lopez's Mary is standing up, she's running, her skirts are flying, you can see her strong, muscular legs. And so, and then there's another image of Yolanda Lopez's Mary as a seamstress. So I think that there are people who are looking to different aspects of Mary, but I think that Younus brought this up and I brought this up, is that why is it that Mary is usually relegated in dialogue, or actually often to, oh, women in religion. This is the topic we're going to talk about today. Why not have her be like Abraham, a role model for all of us? But honestly, I think there is a barrier there, because I had a class this semester, and I asked, and this class had 20 students, and I had actually 10 Muslims and 10 Christians, and I said, guys, do you think that Mary is a role model? And one of the students, and his name was Ibrahim actually, ironically, said, no, she's not a role model for me. So, and I wonder if the Catholic guys were thinking the same thing and they didn't say it, I don't know. So that's a question maybe for all of us. Gentlemen, do you think that she's a role model for you?
Yes. Okay, I see some. Do we have a mic in the public, or do we use one of the two mics?
We have to use one of the, you use one of the two mics.
Okay, the gentleman in front, because I saw his.
Thank you. I'd like to address this very question, because it was mentioned about Mary being a role model for men. In the Quran, in the verse about the fruit, that is in the context of her being a role model for Zechariah, who is not just a man, but is her guardian, and who had been distressed that he couldn't have children. He was told his wife was barren, not possible. He walks into Mary's chamber where she has fresh fruit. And I must say, by the way, it's not necessarily miraculous when he asks the question, where did this fruit come from? It's a fair question for the guardian to ask of his charge, where this fruit appears. And her answer is, I always thought, very moving. Yes, Mr. High Priest, where does this fruit come from? It comes from God. And it is at that point that he begins to pray to God for the impossible, that he should have a son. And then, of course, it goes on and his prayer is granted. So she is not just a model for men in general, but for a particular man, and the high priest is that.
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Doctor, for that comment. Just briefly, I want to just agree, and this is something when I was reading Imam Qurtubi, who's an Andalusian professor or exegete, he also makes this exact point, that Mary is a model for Zechariah, right? So Zechariah is understood to be a prophet in the Islamic tradition. So Mary is seen as a model for a prophet. And this is part of his argumentation that she was a Nabiya, or a female prophet. But at the same time, this remark is also, I think, affirmed with the idea that she's spoken in the Quran as a model for all believers. So a verse that Rita didn't get a chance to show, but in Surah Al-Tahrim or chapter 66, verse 11, also speaks the idea of she is being a model for the believers. Right? So whether you understand her to be a prophet or not, the Quran does say that she is a model for those who have faith, right? That have belief. And I think that is a universal statement, not just necessarily speaking specifically to women. And I very much appreciate the reader raising that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so before I ask my question, like, I agree, like, Mary is, like, beyond, like, a role model. Like, for Christians, like, she's an example. Like, she really helps us learn to love Christ more and more. It actually got me thinking about, like, in the Bible, there's a passage of when, like, at the wedding feast at Cana, like, when the servants, like, told Mary, like, they had no wine, and then like, Mary asked Jesus, like, they have no wine, and then, like, even though Jesus' time hasn't come yet, but he did what Mary asked. Like, she told the servers, do whatever he tells you, and he did what she asked. So that reminds me of how, like, she always points us to Christ, and by loving Mary, we can also love Christ more and more each and every day in our lives. Can't love Christ without Mary. Also, you said that, like, Mary could be like a bridge between Christians and Muslims. What about, like, Christ, since like both Christians and Muslims both believe in Christ? One of the differences obviously being Christians believing he's the Son of God, Muslims believing he's a prophet.
Absolutely Christ. And in fact, there's been a number of books lately, Islam's Jesus, the Muslim Jesus, highlighting Jesus. And actually the Nostra Aetate mentions Jesus, but of course, it also mentions the dividing line, right? Because what you say about Christ puts you on this side or this side. He's a prophet, you're a Muslim. Son of God, you're a Christian. And so I think the challenge for talking about Christ is that we have this long history, and it's a polemical history largely, of Christians and Muslims arguing precisely on that point. So I think that Jesus, and talking about Jesus, has a little more baggage. Not that we should avoid it, because we shouldn't avoid it, but in some sense, Mary is free of some of that polemical baggage. And I think she's an underutilized resource. But definitely we should talk about Jesus too.
And if I may add a few words, from the point of view of a Christian theologian, you can also say that when we are talking about Mary, that the influence of, let's say, the common Christians is relatively bigger, because it's often the sentence, the meaning, the idea of the people in the street, so to say, that brought the theologians to think again. So in that sense, it has some more democracy than what we have often debated about Christ. But of course, that is also debatable. You can see that. Questions? Okay, once more.
This is very short. I just wanted to say that, you can say the dividing line has Jesus is the prophet on one side and Jesus is God incarnate on the other. But underappreciated is that to both Christians and Muslims, Jesus is the Messiah.
Other questions? Yeah.
Hi, I have a question for both of you. So, Dr. Rita, you talked about how often we see Mary, instead of being a bridge of friendship, as a bridge of conversion. And I was wondering for both of you, how do you think we better address Mary in a dialogue and not just simply saying, hey, we believe in Mary, so why don't you become one of us? Something like that. How do you think we kind of enter into a more understanding dialogue?
Thank you for your question. We see in the 1950s, for example, as late as the 50s, Bishop Fulton Sheen, the original televangelist, he wrote a book where he has a whole chapter about Mary as a bridge, but precisely for conversion purposes. Of course, that was his thing, that was what he was doing. But in that same decade was also Louis Massignon, 1950s, stressing Mary as a bridge to dialogue and friendship. And when you look at Nostra Aetate, you have two things happening, right? You first have to have a sense of what is dialogue about, right? And so there will always be a tension between dialogue and proclamation. In fact, there's a document from 91 putting them on the same, like opposite sides of the evangelization coin. So you can't get rid of evangelization proclamation. There's some tension there. But I don't think today people are using her so boldly as a tool the way that Xavier did with the drawings and with the Cantigas de Santa Maria. They were very clearly trying to use it as sort of dangling Mary as a tool. And I say that today she is a bridge to dialogue and friendship. We can discuss the qualities and such. But of course, conversion is always a possibility, but including conversion of myself to a deeper understanding of my own faith. So, but I don't think she should be used as a tool, like an enticement or something. Great question, thank you.
Yeah, so that's a wonderful question, and I think why I like the question so much because it points to, I think, a gap in dialogue. So there's been a lot of discussion about Muslim-Christian dialogue. I 100% agree with Rita that there's an untapped resource. So we have a common word that I know that Pim has been involved with, or a common equitable word, or a word of justice. And, I'm just not aware, to be completely honest, of Mary being used in these kind of settings. So when I read Rita's book, and I read a lot of the secondary literature on Mary, she doesn't come up a lot as a potential bridge in Muslim-Christian dialogue. And regarding the Muslim side, we don't have a full-length monograph on Mary, the Islamic Mary, right? So there, as discussed earlier, we have a book on Abraham that talks about, I've written on Abraham and the Islamic tradition and so far. John Levinson, Graf Baklos, we have books on the Abraham. We have a book on the Islamic Jesus, right? Several books on the Islamic Jesus. But with Mary, there's only some articles. We don't have a monograph that speaks about Mary in terms of Muslim-Christian dialogue and debate. So I think you really pointed to something that's really important and needs to be done. And I would say that one potential way to start is to read some of these texts side by side. In chapter 1 of Rita's book, she does do some of that, and that comparison is really helpful. And I would say that there's a move towards scriptural reasoning, where you read maybe different scriptures together and with people of different religious traditions, and you get different insights. So that's maybe a first step that we could work with.
Before us to the courageous step.
So we've talked a lot about like different ways that Mary has been used in the past. How do you see Mary being used, like going forward into the future of dialogue and
Great question, thank you. One of the very few church leaders who has mentioned Mary is Bishop Ayuso, who's the secretary of the Pontifical Council of Interreligious Dialogue. And when he was in Lebanon on the Annunciation, he said, we should hold up Mary as a model for how we do dialogue. And so he reframed the Annunciation as a dialogue, between the angel and Mary, as between me and you. And so what is that about? So let's look, what can we learn from her? Well, first of all, she welcomes the stranger in. A scary stranger, as we've been told, right? There's always, it's risky to welcome the stranger. So that's the first one. The second one is that she listens and then she asks a question. And then if you read in Luke, Mary ponders. Mary ponders often. So she's reflective. She ponders a bit. And then, of course, at the end of the Gospel of Luke, she consents. So Bishop Ayuso is putting her forward as a model for how we might do dialogue. So I think that's a good place to start.
I like that. Rita mentions that and discusses that further in the book, and I really like the idea. You also find this in the Quranic story that she doesn't simply accept. She questions, she doesn't understand, and debating, and she's trying to find the goodness. When she finds the goodness and what God has to offer, then she accepts it. And I'm going to move forward. And there's a big idea within interreligious studies, interfaith studies, the idea of appreciative knowledge. And I think it's very much exemplified within Rita's book. that the idea that you can encounter the other and appreciate certain things. It may not necessarily lead to conversion into the other religion, but you can say, wow, I'm really impressed with how those people pray, or how they treat their scripture, or how they worship God or treat one another with respect. So you can have that appreciative knowledge where you take the good from other people while maintaining your own worldview, your own religious system. I would also love to hear from people in the audience. I know how many Marys, any Marys here, or you're the Mariam, right? So I would love to hear from Mariam. How she conceives her name and how she, understands herself, in a contemporary modern world with a classical, historical name, but someone living in contemporary times. Mariam, if you want to.
They have a mic or I think I could talk.
Well, first of all, thank you for this wonderful event and your very thought-provoking speeches. As for me, well, it's been a struggle. I was raised in the States for the first 10 years of my life, but then my family and I, we went back to Iran, so I'm originally Iranian. And so I came back like 3 years ago. So I have a lot from the East and the West, and there's always been this question of identity for myself. When I because in my mind, I'm thinking, so where am I, in the 21st century? Can I be a bridge, or do I function as a barrier sometimes? Because I do, like in my daily life, when I sort of encounter my, when I come to university, when I walk in the street, I do get a lot of looks. And that is, on one side, you wonder, okay, so do I belong or not? And then on the other hand, when I was in Iran, well, there are a lot of young people, of my age that don't really, observe the religion, and they don't really want to practice Islam. And so at some point in time in Iran, I didn't belong. So there's always this question for me, do I belong? How can I relate to people? And what I've learned from, the image of Mary or Maryam, is that to have patience, because those who want to bridge the gap, who want to serve as, a bridge, have to have the patience, because patients always, in the long run, they have reacted at certain times, but in the long run, it's very beneficial. So patience has been the number one thing that I've been trying to work on myself, and it's worked, and it's worked out very well. So in terms of your question about how I, belong, or is it more about the figure of Mary in Christianity or Islam? So
yeah, I guess I'm interested. Yeah, how do you connect, with the historical Mary in the modern kind of time?
So that's what I mentioned about how I sort of connect myself with, at least the name of Mary in this era, but historically speaking, it's more about her obedience to God. So I see myself as, at times when I struggle, I see myself as submitting to the will of God. So submission in that means, because Mary, although when she's giving birth to Jesus, she wishes for her death, and she wishes that, I wish I didn't go through this pain and all that. But she was very, very patient when she sort of she took the fasting of being silent. So again, I'm coming back to that patience figure, but being submissive to the will of God is also something. It's like a theme that always runs through my mind. So being submissive to the will of God and also being active in the modern time. So sort of these two elements together, they run parallel. For me, that's how I could say I relate to the historical Mary and the modern.
Yeah, hi. This is going to be not a very clear question probably, but I was wondering whether, especially Dr. Rita, I guess, is familiar at all with the theology of Father Christian de Chergé. I was reading Christian Sanson's book about him, A Theology of Hope, and I'm remembering now, I wish I remember a lot better, I have to reread it, the use of the visitation narrative and energy as a very encompassing kind of avenue for interreligious dialogue with the Muslims in particular. And it kind of occurs to me like, wasn't he sort of saying that we're all theotokos in some way? I mean, we all sort of at least carry the Spirit of God, and that there are these ways in which we're communicating through what we carry, which is like us, that is very hopeful and creates divine energy that we should really trust and believe in as we go forward. I don't know if it makes any sense.
Well, first of all, I'm glad you brought up Christian de Chergé, because I encourage all of you, if you are not familiar with him, he is one of the Trappist monks from Algeria who were recently beatified, and there's a movie about them, Des Hommes et des Dieux, which is a beautiful film. I always tell my students it's a slow film. It's slow on purpose. They want to show the rhythm of monastic life. It's beautiful, but it's a true story about these Trappists that were killed during the Algerian Civil War in the 90s. But it's really about the love of Christians and Muslims as neighbors. And there's a letter that goes with the movie, The Last Will and Testament. It's a one-page, beautiful letter. But it doesn't mention the visitation, so I'm interested. I don't know what other theology he wrote about it, but it doesn't surprise me that he would be speaking about the visitation, because he was well-read in Christian-Muslim dialogue. And I do know that visitation is another very fruitful topic of dialogue. In fact, the poet Rumi evidently devoted an entire section of the Mahnawi to the visitation image. And also Rumi goes on in other places about Mary. Jesus is the rose, and Mary is the branch. So it's a rich image that Muslims have written about. I don't know if you want to comment on that as well. But see, there's kind of going back to the young lady's question in the back about what can we talk about as Christians and Muslims. We can talk about the Annunciation. Why not talk about the visitation as well? So thank you for that.
Thank you. I was going to comment, because my name is a form of Mary, so it's in response to that question, Marie. But it's also connected to the question about the visitation, because my favorite image is Mary of Magnificat, and that's the visitation. And my work is really in justice, peace, care for creation. And so Mary's Magnificat, where she's God will raise up the lowly and bring down the mighty, and she's strong, and so that's my Mary image.
Hey, I could ask the doctor, how could a devout a Sunni see Mary as opposed to a devout Shia? Would it be the same view, and also be a devout soul? Would be a difference?
So that's a great question in terms of the maybe Sunni-Shia difference. So in terms of Shiism, there is this sense of reverence to the Imam, reverence to the family of the Prophet Muhammad, reverence and veneration even to particularly Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad. So there is this more, I think Rita mentioned once again Lebanon, right? So even though the person who discussed the celebration of Annunciation was Sunni, I think there would be a lot of Shi'is that would be supportive, right, of this kind of venerating, maybe even visitation of shrines and so forth. So that is found within kind of Shi'ism, that the reverence to the family of the Prophet, to the Imam, and maybe potentially some forms of intercession or shrine visitation. Where in Sunniism you have different movements, you have different schools of thought, you have maybe more Sufi inclinations that may be more amenable to that. Right? But even some Sufis may not go that far of calling out Mary's name, where some Sunday figures that are more hadith-based would look down upon them, and they would see that as a form of polytheism, that you shouldn't, call out to anyone except them. So, in Rita's book, she talks about Martin Luther. When I read talking about Martin Luther and how he's critical of Catholic views of Mary and the relationship with Catholic, it made me remind me of certain, Salafi figures or hadith-based figures in the Islamic tradition, like Ibn Taymiyyah, or Ibn Qayyim, who are also kind of critical of their times of what they see as excessive veneration, or even what they would consider to be, polytheistic practices. So within Islam, you have different movements and different ways of understanding Mary. Some, maybe more text-based, would want to read the Surah Maryam, reflect upon it, recite it in prayer, while others may say we want to go to some of the shrines that Rita talked about and make supplications. Thanks so much for that.
Okay, come to our last question.
Yeah. So earlier, we were talking how Mary submits to God, which is a great thing. When the angel visited her, she said she's the handmaid of the Lord, may be done to me according to your word. And also how she was with Christ when he was being tortured and killed and crucified. She accepted, she knew that he would one day die for the sins of mankind, but she didn't hide him away from the world, but rather helped him grow up in the faith and supported him all the way, which is amazing. My question would be since we have a lot of months, we have Black History Month, Women's History Month, National Sexual Awareness Month, do you think a month dedicated to Mary, in terms of revering her, remembering her life here on earth, would not only bridge Christians and Muslims, but also begin to better our world, change our world for better?
Well, we have a month for Mary already. I think it's May, so it's coming up. But I like your idea of maybe perhaps expanding the focus and including the focus on the Magnificat and what does Mary have to say about justice and the lowly. And I like your point at the end, sort of what I think is important. One of the most important ideas about Mary for me as a Christian is Stabat Mater. She was there. I think it goes with some other quote, 95% of life is just showing up and being present and persevering. So yeah, I like your idea. Let's advertise May a little more for Mary. Yes?
Can I just one thought? Because we've been discussing this idea of bridge and barrier, and if a bridge, is it a bridge to conversion? Is it a bridge to dialogue? And what type of conversion, what type of dialogue? I just want to bring back words that I still find very insightful and that might help us to see how it is often two sides of the same coin. And this refers to the famous meeting between St. Francis of Assisi and Sultan America Kamel in Damietta 800 years ago, exactly 1219 in Egypt. And you may know that, of course, there are a number of festivities this year. We hope here at CUA to organize a festivity on this very same meeting in November. And we hope to connect that to the document concerning human fraternity that Pope Francis, together with the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, Ahmed Al-Tayyib, and we hope to get Ahmed Al-Tayyib here to campus. Inshallah, he will come. The reason I wanted to say that is not to advertise, well, of course I did, but to, I've been struck by the words by a French bishop, George-Tvrtkovic, who was the bishop of Acre, of Akko, and he was not, let's say, a Franciscan. He didn't know what to make of it. He said, well, this is this strange man that went to convert the Sultan, and they had conversations. He didn't succeed, but in the end they decided to pray for one another that God may give the religion that would be the most expedient for them. And I find that so wise, because it is in between the model where you convert the other to your faith And another way you say, well, the end of dialogue is, I'm a better Christian, you're a better Muslim. It is leaving it to God, which I think is basically, we need to do our work, we need to try to be good Christians, to be good Muslims, and the religion that is best for us, in the end, that is up to God. I'm sorry, I wanted to say that.
Thank you so much. I want to invite all of you to enjoy the festivities, and one comment, real quick? Yeah, so quick comment from our esteemed scholar from the IIIT.
I missed a lot because it took us with my 3 friends 2 hours from Virginia to come here. Alhamdulillah, we made it safe. We made it safe. I think that Mary is a model from several verses of the Quran, role model that is. One of them is, يا مريم إن الله اصطفاك وطهرك واصطفاك على نساء العالمين. It's striking here that God, you Mary, God chosen you and purified you and chosen you on all women of the world. This is the literal translation. So it's so clear that Mary is the most chosen and most purified of all women existed from Eve till the end of judgment. Now I have a question next time.
Very little.
But the question is short, but I don't know what the answer is. In Islam, it's very clear that Virgin Mary, period. No more. And the mother of Jesus. Okay. But I understand, I may be wrong, that in Christianity, she was virgin, then she gave birth, and then she got married and all this. So what is the Christian answer or answers to this?
That's what Protestants say. Catholic version is very different.
I want to learn.
Yeah, I think you can say, if I may, in a few words, so there are, of course, texts in the Bible that are interpreted differently, because there's texts about brothers and sisters of Jesus. Is that to be meant literally? In that case, Mary could not have been always a virgin after the birth. There are other interpretations that say, no, the word brother and sister you need to take in a more wider sense. It's a wider family, it's not strictly brothers and sisters. So I would say there's already differences of interpretation in the exegesis of these texts in the New Testament. And then, of course, the traditions develop further. If you think that Mary is really very important as in her purity, in her remaining virginity, like the Catholics do, you go further along that road. If you try to get back a bit more to the literal New Testament meaning, like many Protestants do, you go more along that road. So I would say there are different answers to that question. Thank you. Let's give our best.